we're going to get started. I was painting our sweet little snow days. To start with, put that aside. I've got my blank sled all the way. I've got these from Patricia Rollinson. This one is just a plaque actually, as opposed to the original one I did is actually a sled. So it does come with our little rails, these little guys right here. And what we're going to do just for fun, if you do have the sled, that's what I've done is I've painted it, then I'm going to add a little texture to it, so we'll do that a little bit later. And we'll demo it and see how we can make them look all frosty and glittery. So put those aside for now. But to paint the sled, I actually started with DecoArt, Americana Decor Chalky Finish. I use Serene. So I like to use these because for one thing, ultra flat finish, which I just love. No sealing is required, which I really quite like. Just one step less we need to do it. And it also covers very well in just one coat. If you don't have the chalk finish paint, you can actually use the winter blue up here somewhere, DecoArt's winter blue, and you'll get exactly the same look. But for my project, I'm going to use the chalk finish paint just because I like to show you how easy it goes on. So we're going to start that right now. We're going to give this a quick coat of paint. I love this stuff. You can see actually how thick it is. It's actually quite thick. It's like pudding. Makes you want to lick it. So I'm going to put that aside, and we're going to throw a quick coat of paint on here. I actually use these Dynasty Eye of the Tiger brushes. They're like dirt cheap, like $3 a pop. The bristles never fall out, and I love the way it moves the paint around without actually pulling it off of the surface. So anybody who's tried using the chalk finish and has wondered why, if you have stiff bristled brushes, you'll find that the paint does tend to pull off, whereas this one kind of smooths it along like you're buttering something. So quick coat on here. And see how easy it goes on? Just one coat. Just love it. Put that on quickly. And like I said, if you don't have the chalk finish paint, just throw a coat of all-purpose sealer on here, and then throw on a couple of coats of the winter blue. You'll get exactly the same color, the same look. At the end of the day, it'll all look exactly the same. And see how quickly? So quick. Not even using that much paint. The trick is to stay on camera. I've got my camera set up a little differently than I've had the last time I did my video, hoping that I'm not going to paint upside down like I did for my 2014 art playdate video, but it was a lot of fun. Did enjoy that. Don't forget just to clean up your sides a bit. I am going to paint around the sides. This part at the bottom is actually going to be the snowman color, so I'm not too worried about it. Just go around. I'll clean up the edges later, but for now, we're going to put this aside and let it dry, and then we're going to come right back and we're going to do our stencil. Okay, so we're back and my piece is dry. So what we're going to do now is we're actually going to stencil on the background, and what I used was this absolutely wonderful winter word stencil from Patricia Rollinson. If you don't have this one, I like this one just because it had a difference between it has the snowflakes and the words and stuff, but you could use just snowflakes. You could have, you know, if you don't want, you could just put regular snowflakes on the background. You could leave the background. It's up to you. But for what I did here is I just wanted to sort of put it on, so I move it off to the side a little bit. I want some of the words to sort of show up partway off of the board. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to use blue chiffon. And I've got these stencil brushes, and when I stencil, I like to have very little paint on the brush, but I like the brushes to be really good because I want the stencil to sort of become part of the background, not sit on top of the background. So I've got my favorite ones is Creative Coach, Lori Speltz's stencil brush, or this is a Dynasty brush, which I quite like. It's one of their new stencil brush series. And this is a Tracy Moreau stencil brush. This is great if you're going to use texture and stuff, because this little bit end here is just a little bit longer than what you're sort of normally accustomed to, and it does help to sort of get into those little sections. So I'm going to show you how I dry rub my backgrounds on, and make it look sort of like it's part of the background, and it doesn't sort of stand out. So a little bit blue chiffon. And let's see, I like this. This is my favorite one, my Lori's Belts one. So we're going to load our brush. And what I do is I actually take my brush and I put it in the paint, and I actually swirl it right around because I want to get quite a bit of paint on the brush. Where's the brush? There it is. And then I'm just going to tap it on my paper towel. And then I'm going to take my stencil and I'm just going to start. And what I do is I kind of swirl it on the background, just all over the place. And what you'll see is you get a very soft stenciled background. So I'm going to go through and I'm going to finish the whole thing. And I don't want it perfect. I don't want it even. I don't want, you know, it perfectly solid. I just want it to sort of fade away a little bit here and there. And don't forget, your design's going to be primarily in this middle section. So concentrate mostly around the outside. Lift it back every now and then, have a little look. Pick up more paint as required, because you do use a fair bit of paint when we do this. The brush sucks up a lot of it. So get some more. Load my brush, swirl in that paint, because I don't want the brush to be picked up, and I don't want to have a gob of paint on here. So I like it to look like it's sort of dried right in there. Tap it on my paper towel. Swirl it about. And when you pull it back and you look at it, if you see sections that aren't coming in, that's okay. We can go back and we can add little details later on if we want. There's no right or wrong. You don't even have to use the stencil exactly as it is. You can move it around, which I'm going to do because I'm going to want more words to show up. And I'm not even going to worry about this section because this is where my design's going to go. It's going to be covered. This big snowflake. Let's get a little bit in there. You can pounce. I just prefer to do the swirly thing because it just gives me a nice soft background. Not to mention works up the arm muscles. Nice and soft so far. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at some of these blank, like of course I'm going to come down here a little bit, but look at some of the blank spots because I want to have a little bit of words. I'm going to take my hope word, I'm going to add it in here just so I can see a little bit on the corners. I like some of the words. A little bit of hope. And I'll pop a little joy down in here just so a part of it will stick out from behind the design. That. And I'm not going to worry, none of this down here I'm not going to worry about because once the piece is done, where am I here? You're not even going to see it. So I'm primarily worried just with the background up here. It just adds a little interest. It doesn't really show up. It doesn't have to be perfect. And then of course we're going to take our stencil when we're done and wash it. But what I'm going to show you in the meantime while we wait for that is the rails. And what I did is I'll come up close a little bit. Where's the thing? I have no idea where this is. Anyway, I put a little bit of texture on it. Some snowflakes up in here. So what we're going to do is we're going to do the back side because I've only got one set of rails. I'm going to show you, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the same snowflake stencil, this guy right here, and take a few of the snowflakes. And what I do is I'm going to take my Texture Crackle, DecoArt's Texture Crackle. You can still get it, or you can use any texture paste that you have, anything that's going to give you a little bit of texture. I'm going to take that, and we're going to take my little putty knife, a little bit of texture on here. And I'm just going to scoop out a little bit onto the knife, put it on my palette because I don't want to have very much, so I'm going to have about that much on my palette. And then I'm going to do my little snowflakes. Put the snowflake stencil in here, just rub a little bit on, pull it off. And I'm just moving it around. I don't want to have a lot of snowflakes on here, just a few here and there. Just added a little bit of interest. Just because, you know, I like glitter. If you don't have the rails, you don't even need to worry about it. You can just leave it. That's, yeah. A little over here. And that's just optional. I just thought it was kind of fun. And they don't even need to be perfect. They can be a little bit off. A little blurry, that's no problem. Nice thing about this is if you get one that's really bad, you can just wipe it off with a damp paper towel. So go ahead and do both of these. What we're going to do now, and then we're just going to put it aside and let these dry. So the rails can be put aside to dry. Stencil can be washed. These guys are going to go away, and we'll just come back to those later at the end of the project just to play with. Put all your things away. And then we're going to come back and we're going to trace on our pattern and start painting. Okay, so we've got our pattern drawn out, and what I've done now is I'm going to lay my pattern down, line it up, and what I want to do is it's going to go right over the edges. So I just want to line it up to basically where the house and the tree have some sort of, so there's fairly even. And then I'm going to line it up just about 1/4 of an inch up from the bottom of the sled, just to give it a little room to add the snow at the bottom. Going to line them up. And what I do when I trace out my design is I lay my thing down, and I'll pick up the corner. I'm just going to slide my palette, my graphite paper underneath. And I'm going to trace out my design. I'm not going to trace this part. I don't like to paint around everything. I'm basically a lazy painter. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to base coat my whole snowman in the buttermilk, but then I'm going to come back before I do all my shading and my details, and I'm then going to trace the rest of the details on. Same as the scarf tails. If you want to put them on, go ahead. I just prefer to paint around everything and then add them back later. So go ahead and get your pattern traced on, and then we're going to rearrange and add a few more words to the background, and then we're going to get started base coating, and then the fun starts. So I've got it traced on. I'm quite happy with how it turned out. Put my graphite away. I'm going to get my word stencil back, because what I want to do is add a few more words into the background. Just, because some of them got covered, some of my favorite words. I like a few of the fun ones. For the most part, I've got my hope here. I've got Gloria sort of coming through here. But other than that, I lost all my words. So I just want to add a couple more in just for fun. So I'm going to take my stencil. I'm going to find one of the ones that I like. I'm really bad for cleaning my stencils. Don't do what I do. It's not good. Let's see. I think I'll have a little bit peeking out from under here. And I don't have a joy or a believe showing up yet. So I'm going to put joy. A little joy maybe up here, peeking out from under the hat, right at the very top, with my blue chiffon. But if you're happy with the background, you don't have to do this part. I just, kind of like a few more extra words in here just for fun. I'll load my brush. And think of just a little joy. It's going to be peeking out just a little bit. The idea is that you don't see the full spelling of the words. I'm going to put, let's see, where should I do? Maybe a little bit of believe. Maybe down here, going off the board. Soft. So go ahead and add a few that you like, just for fun. And we're going to start base coating. And what I did is I base coat and shade, and base coat and dry brush and shade. So I'm going to start with buttermilk. I'm going to base coat the whole snowman body right down to the bottom of the sled. And then I'm going to paint the hat. So I'm going to get going, and I'm going to turn my video off because I don't think you need to watch me do all my base coating. But I'll start, just so you can see how a messy painter I really am. Because sometimes it's nice to see that we're not all perfect. We're very messy. I'm just going to use a 1/2 inch brush, just any old brush, just one of my rattier brushes. And I'm just going to start base coating. And because I layer my colors, I dry brush my layers. I just want one good coat. It doesn't have to be perfect. You just want to have one good coat of coverage. And spread it out so it's not thick. I don't like thick, and I'm very bad for my ridges. And when I paint in circles or in areas, I tend to start away from the outside edge and push my paint inwards so that I don't get any ridges. I turn my piece around because I'm paint backwards for a right-handed person. And I see how I'm just starting out, and I'm just pushing, and I'm almost, my brush is fairly dry. I don't have a lot of paint on my brush. And just use my chisel edge to get in tight to my edges. My knot's going to go there, so I'm not too worried. So that's my first coat, and that is, I'm quite happy with that for the first coat. We will go do a very light second coat on it. So you want to get that base coated and get down here base coated, and then we're going to come back and start doing some more. So I'm busy base coating away. I'm almost finished. And what I know that a lot of what I'm doing, because I did base coat the surface already in blue, is have a tendency to be a bit on the redundant side. It's just that I like to clean up as I go. And like I've said before, I'm a very messy painter, and a lot of people have asked me how I end up with, you know, my pieces looking so soft and stuff like that. That's basically how I do it. I do everything in layers. I find it gives me less potential to have ridges of paint, which I don't want, and allows me to keep my layers of paint quite thin. And really, I think in the grand scheme of things, it keeps things, for me, helps with things to go a lot faster. I spend a less time sanding, base coating, waiting for things to dry. I'm going to paint my edges up just to give it a nice clean look. And I've only got my one coat on right for now, and that's just fine, because that's the start of how I'm going to show you how I do my next step, which also makes, I call it a lesson in floating for people who don't like to float. You're not going to like this part, but I love to float, and I float everything, and I'll float it 2 or 3 times because I can. And I just like the way it starts to look at the very end. I am going to go back and clean this up after, when I go back to my rails. I just haven't done it yet. I just noticed that's embarrassing, but it is. I'm just going to do my ends. Get this looking a little bit cleaner. One of the things I like about the chalky finish background too is you can't really see it, is that it does give the piece just that little tiny bit of texture, and I love texture. I dry brush just about everything. So the little bit of texture that's in there, I find, just helps to give things just a little bit more interest. I don't like perfectly flat, smooth surfaces. I know some people do. I just don't. So you don't have to do everything the way I do. It's just how I do it. So I've got my one coat. I'm not going to do the purple yet because I don't see the point in it, because I'm going back to base coating that and when I do my second coat. But what we are going to do is we're going to shade around the background, and I'm going to use Wedgwood Blue. And what I do is I shade around the outside edge of all of my stuff, because for one thing, when I do it before I do all my painting, is it helps me to just get a soft look around the outside of my pieces. And I'll go back to my original, and you can see how it sort of sets all the shading, goes into the background. So one thing, I like the fact that, especially if you teach this class or if I'm teaching beginners, it does give them a chance to get comfortable floating, but it also just adds a little depth. It takes away from, you know, the look of the piece just being totally flat. So what we're going to do now is we're going to shade that with my, of all things, yes, I do use a 3/8 angle shader for everything. I get it, it works for me. You use whatever brush you are comfortable with, be it a flat shader or an angle shader, a round, whatever you works fine. So we're going to start shading him. I need my paper towel for my blotting. Have this giant roll because you got to have a giant roll of paper towel. And I tend to fold them up Not that I'm one of those neat, tidy people. I just like the fact that it takes up less of my palette. Stick that on my palette. During the past, I've always used Easy Float in my water. I use several drops. I'm not shy with it. I'll use, 5 or 6 drops in each section of my water bin. DecoArt is currently not making it anymore. I have asked them. Lots of people have actually asked DecoArt. Hopefully they'll reconsider and give it back. But if not, that's okay. It's just I have hard water where I am, and I find it just gives that little bit of conditioning in the water and helps my painting, allows my drying time just that little bit longer. If you do have a chance to use it and you do have some, definitely try it. I think you'll quite like it, especially if you do have a problem getting nice soft floats. So when I load my brush, I take my paper towel and I just blot some of the water out. I like water, but not a lot. I take just the little corner of my brush, not very much, and I blend it back and forth on my palette. And if it's soft on the palette, it's going to be soft on the piece. And then I'll start in the corner of my piece right here. And this is a good spot. And I'll just work my little floats around the corner. And another thing that's very important is I use a mop brush. If you've got a chalk finished background, you're going to notice that when you float, where did I go here? You're going to see just a little bit of wet that's not going to look right. It's okay, it dries. Don't worry about it. It's just the chalk finish is so flat that you're going to see a little bit of that. Once it dries, it's gone. And I do reload my brush quite often. And I pity pat my float. So I'll start it up in that corner. I think I'll turn them around. And I do tend to pull them toward me a lot. I find for me that works. And I'm very soft. I don't do a hard float. I just sort of put it down. I just pull my float along very softly. I don't do, some people, this has just got water in it. I don't pull my floats straight down and then go like so. I find it's better for me to pity pat them and pull my little tiny puddle of paint along. I'd rather work in small sections than try to get one great big long float. Let's see if I make sure I'm staying on camera here. And I'm floating around the entire design to start with. You could have done it before we did the buttermilk. To be brutally honest, I actually forgot because I was so excited to get painting. But you can, because painting and base coating is actually going to help us clean up that little bit of mess that we might have made in our floating. And I pat them right away, very softly. Make sure I'm staying on my camera. Because you can't hear me, you can't yell at me if I don't stay on my camera, but I try hard not to. So I'm going to bounce around. And the nice thing is I can actually, if you're not comfortable getting your float started in an area, you can actually start in the part that you have yet to paint, because you're going to paint over it and make it look all nice and pretty. And when I mop it, it comes out quite soft. Mostly because I'm not using a lot of paint and I am using the water that's in the brush to help pull it along. Let's see. As you see, I move around a lot. Try not to go over what I've already done. I don't want to lift my floats up. And around my corners. Constantly moving my piece. Pulling towards me. And then quickly mopping. And don't freak out, it does look a little bit dark at first, but definitely once we get painting, it's not going to be dark anymore. It's going to fade into the background. I go quickly, I'm not going to think about it. Try not to overthink it. Start in this little corner. And see how I'm starting in the corner? That's allowing me to get that darker, deeper corner going on in there. And go around. And see, I'm just pulling the paint. Very little pressure on my brush. And then I do have a little bird here that I did trace on. He's the only other piece in the background that is going to require some shading. So I'm going to move my piece around. I'm going to shade my little bird just around the outside. Are you on screen? There we are. And don't forget, the darkness that you're seeing is just the water in the project, in the background, sitting on top of the chalk finish paint. There. And if you are, worrying about it, you can see that where I did start off, and I showed you the water lines, they are dried up now and the background is just fairly soft. So I'm going to put that away. So now we've got our little background going on. It's going to add a little fun to the piece. So now we're going to take out our purple cow, because I don't know why, but you'll see I use a lot of purple, a lot of really interesting colors in my pieces. You know what? I'm not even personally a fan of purple. I just like to paint with it. Purple is not a color I wear. So we're going to put that out. I'm going to get another little brush. Oh, another Dynasty brush. A little bit smaller. We're going to paint our hat. Same thing. And a little coat of purple. And actually, before I finish that, I'm going to put that aside for a minute because I actually forgot one little tiny step. This is dry. We put our pattern back on. Because I want to add the scarf bits. I mean, if I'm going to start painting, I might as well have my scarf bits. Get those on there. Not this stuff though. We're not going to do any of these other stuff or any face yet, because we do need to do more work on the snowman body. Quickly trace this on. A little bit around. Give him this little knot. Ah. Perfect. Now we're going to finish painting it. So we finished painting our little toque. You know what I found out? I was down at a hoot and I discovered that nobody knows what a toque is. It's a winter hat. It's a Canadian thing. So it's a hat, a head sock. I don't know what you guys want to call it, but I call it a toque. I think it's a French-Canadian thing. It's all I've ever known them to be called. It was a lot of giggling at me, at my expense, by calling it a toque. So if you didn't know what a toque was, you do now. It's a Canadian thing. And with any luck, you're all painting this because it is having a snow day. Right now I'm painting it and it's actually a cooler day, but I do live in the Okanagan Valley in beautiful British Columbia, Canada. And it's basically Canada's desert where I live, which is Penticton, British Columbia, 4 hours from Vancouver, BC. I can go to Seattle from here. It's 6 hours to Seattle. But it takes me a lot longer to go to Seattle because apparently there are several Hobby Lobby stores on the way. We don't have Hobby Lobbies here in Canada. So it is a treat. And see how this background now, as I'm painting, you see how the background is starting to fade away. I know you're watching it and it's getting upside down and my piece is going in all sorts of different directions. That should be right side up for you. See a little bit of pressure on my corners. Brush out the ridges. So anyway, I live in the town that I live. We have a beach 2 blocks from my house. It is a rare town, city actually, in that we have a beach at 2 different lakes with a beach at both ends of the city, from end to end. Beautiful place. Hot and toasty. For Canadians, we are in the upper 30s daily all summer long. And that does come to, I think, roughly around 100 degrees Fahrenheit. It's a little bit toasty. I do paint a lot of snowmen during that season for some strange reason. I don't know why. You see how I use little paint? I think I'm very pinched up. I do like to paint with very little paint. So now, if you were freaking out that your background was at all too dark, it certainly isn't now. So we're going to let this dry, the purple dry, but we're going to go back and we're going to do another coat now of the buttermilk, and that will be your finished coat. Even if it's not 100% perfect, it is going to be your finished coat. So we'll start with his little face. So he's all base coated now. We've got our finished coats on there. So what we're going to do now is we're going to transfer on the pattern, like all the details, with our graphite. So line them up. You know, he grows a little bit. I actually used my basic pattern before, but now I've got the finished pattern on here. So it's adjusted a little bit, but yours will look a lot cleaner than this. So we're going to trace on the outer shapes. We're not going to put all these little tiny details in here. We're just going to put just the basic shapes, his face. And trace it on with your graphite paper. I lay my pattern down, and then I slide my graphite paper. I don't use a big piece. I use a small piece. And I do my tracing all along. Just enough pressure to get my pieces to come through. Trace on the whole thing. We're not going to do any faces. The tree. And I've actually gone ahead. I've already traced this on. Once he's on. So it's just basic lines. We're not going to do a lot of any redundant details on there. I'm going to get his little face out. So we've got that. His little face. I have to notice, I did a little playback on my video there, and I see you've all met Miss Lily. She's the dog barking in the background. And I'm actually going to introduce you to her because she's my little treasure. She's nothing but trouble. So you're going to hear her periodically off and on the video. I don't even need to put his little mouth in here. I'm just marking it off for my own personal use. We're going to put his hat marks on because we're going to use those for shading. They are going to be our shading guidelines. I always slide it up to have a little look underneath and watch, see where my lines are. Birdie's already on there, so we don't need to do any more with him. Going to put, I'm going to mark off where his arms go as well. Just here, because I want to put these little shading lines in. So put that back here. Line it up as best we can. I did actually do a line across the bottom here. So line it up with the base of your piece. And then put your graphite paper under. Over here. There I am, back on camera. So I've marked off my snow line. If you use the flat board, it actually is the same. It's just going to give you sort of a fun look to the bottom. If you want to mark it straight across, you can, if your board is square. Yep, there it is. Let's see. We'll get his little, just here for his lines. Maybe indicate where his snow is going to go. Out of the way. And just move your pattern around, because if your piece does grow, and then we all know everything seems to grow a little bit when we do our base coating. Helps if you don't use your basic pattern to start with, like I did. So there. We've got him in there. He's got a little bit of marks and stuff. There's nothing to worry about. And then what we're going to do is we're going to start shade around these design elements. So anyway, we're starting first with our winter blue. Right there. And we're going to shade around everything. So I've started off, I've got a little bit of Easy Float in my water. I'm going to put my winter blue on my palette. Load up my trusty angle brush. Right there. tried a different setup for my video this year, and I'm sure you're seeing the top of my head way more often than you do. And I'm going to zoom in a little bit too. I think what we'll do is we'll start painting and just moving my piece around for a little bit of closer so you can actually see what it is that I'm doing. Stay on camera here. We'll start with his face. So I'm going to start by just shading around the face with winter blue. It's very soft, it's not a stark color. And I know sometimes when we do paint blues over top of our buttermilks and stuff, we do use darker blues. And I found that for me, I didn't like the stark contrast of blues against white. So I thought, well, I'll try the winter white. And I actually quite like it because it does take on a different look as I deepen the shading later on when I'm finished. And if you are finding that, you know, if you get any water lines and stuff during this part of the painting, you don't even have to worry about it because we're actually going to dry brush. And when I teach my classes, and I showed this to students, is when I dry brush out any places that I do have a sharp line, I do manage to get most of them cleaned up with the dry brushing section. So don't freak out if you get dirty lines. We're going to just keep going. And then we did the base coating of the scarf earlier, so we're going to float around that, and we are going to do a finish coat on it when we're done, because, you know, I like the fact that I can make a big old mess like that if I want to. That's what I like to do. And I'm keeping my float fairly soft, not making it stark. Even if it's not even consistent, that's okay. It's just designed to be sort of a shadow in the background. It's not designed for anything more than to add a little bit of depth. And see how I went over the corner? I don't care about that. Where is he? Right here. I went over the corner here, but that's okay because when I sharpen up my painting of the purple, it's going to all make it all nice and clean and pretty, especially up in here. You know, we all have problems trying to get those nice little floats in there. I'm not even going to worry about it. It's my paint. Messy, and don't worry about it. We'll fix it when we're done. And you're going to find by the time you finish this project, if you didn't already, you're going to figure out just how it is that we fix everything as we go. I have to remember to keep this on camera since I moved everything forward. And see how I'm doing that again? I'm just making a mess. And that is how we're going to do everything. I quickly mop because I want my edges to stay soft. I don't pounce hard, I pounce very softly, straight up and down, not, you know, not pulling it away or anything, but just quick pounce, very soft. Reload my brush. Now I wanted to wait till this is dry, so what I can do if I can start in here, a little bit of an angle. And see, you can do that without worrying about the purple. And I find it actually does give me nice soft floats. There. When we deepen the shading in the next layer, that's when you're going to put it into like corners to make more depth and shadows. And this is a folk art piece, so you know we're not doing everything perfectly fine. My sunshine is not necessarily up here or anything like that. It's just all about creating depth, interest. These are his little. I gotta keep this here. We're going to shade inside his little pockets here where his arms are going to go. Where am I? It's going to be hard. In here. Shade in there. And where's his body? Right down here. So we're going to start shading around the houses. Because everything has to be shaded around. It's going to look really bad. So there's the moon. It's okay. This is where it looks really ugly. So my house, tuck in little floats in the corners. And right over top of where the snow is going to go. That way I'm not getting any sharp floats, not getting stopping and starting lines. I'm just getting a soft little look. I think we'll go and do all our little right sides first. This is going to be the tree. It's going to scooch along there towards the bottom. Quick mop. Then I'm going to turn, once I do all my right hand sides, we're just going to turn them around and do all the other sides. And this is going to be the poles to his little quilt that's hanging there. What a neat idea, hey? Like I said, I do a lot of my design work. It's all based on my friend Terry French. Her and I worked together for a number of years. And she's a great inspiration. She was a very dear friend. And unfortunately, with her passing last year in November, it's been very difficult for me. And every time I do bring some of her creations to life, like this one was based on a design that she had sent me, it's very bittersweet for me. She actually passed away November last year, Thanksgiving. It was very traumatizing. Way too young, 63 years old she was. Very big inspiration to the art community with her folk art designs and stuff. I was very fortunate to have found such a friend in Terry. All my designs are based on her work, whether I just sketch something out myself or use something that she drew for me and wanted me to bring to life. So I've had a tough time of it, but I'm working at it, getting some of these brought to life so that I can keep her design work fresh and interesting and share with her what she wanted everybody to have was joy in painting. So I hope you're getting joy in painting. Okay, so now, oops, go up here where his little tree is. The roof. Good Lord, I'm having a hard time here. There we go. And see how messy it's all becoming? Very messy, but we don't care. We like it that way. And we'll come across here. Finish along the top. And see, again, I just pull my floats very softly along. Alright, so now what we're going to do is I'm going to turn them around so that we can do the opposite side. Shade around everything. You know, like I take my techniques back to the days when I used to learn how to paint, and the antiquing of projects was very popular, and I could not for the life of me figure that out. So what I started doing was just shading around the design before I started painting it, and I started getting a rather unique look to it. And it's just stuck. Used to be just burnt umbers, of course, just for the old primitive look, but I like color. So I've been playing with color, and I've been finding different ways to create my backgrounds. And this being one. And I love snowman because they're just fun to play with. And see how I do a star? I'm just going around the star in such a way that doesn't really matter. I'm going to just tap in some color. You can actually go through the star if you can't paint around them as best as you want. Just because I want to have a little bit of color around them. And up the other side of the post. Very messy. Isn't that fun though, just to be messy? I know you're all like, oh my god. Don't be. You're going to find out all the dry brushing and the fun that we're going to do with this to make it pop. And at the end you're going to go, wow, I don't have to be clean and tidy anymore. Around the trees. I'm going to try to edit out a lot of this stuff, but you know what? In the finished video, if it's in there, it's in there. You can have your giggles at my expense. I do. Look, she's off camera again. Oh my gosh. And let's see. Oh, we got to go under his little nose. Because his nose is going to be, you know, in there. And where else? Oh! Take the base down here, the bottom of the sled. Because it's going to play in the finished look of the snowman. I actually, if you notice, a lot of my floats going to be almost like washes. Okay. So there he is, all floated. So now what we're going to do is we're going to, oops, I missed one. Which is what you got to do, is you take a look around and see all the things that you missed. Moon. Alright, I'm going to get all my, let that dry, I'm going to get all my colors to start base coating, and we're going to get started. Okay, I've pulled out all my colors, so what we're going to do is we're going to start with a finished coat of the purple cow. So I'm going to load my palette with my purple cow. Yeah, it's not finished. Let's see, since I have the purple on, I might as well put my other little bit of purple in. And when you refer to your color photo, I have 3 purple little squares in my quilt. 1, 2. So since I've got that color out, I'm just going to go and do all my base coating depending on the colors that I have. Oh gosh, I hope I'm in screen. Yeah, I am. And let's see, one more down here. Just use your color photo as a guide if you're not painting along with me, because it's that simple. Everything's done by color. So that's all the purple that had in the little quilts. And see, we're going to go back to our winter blue, which is what we shaded with. And the first house here is winter blue. We're going to base coat that. A little bit bigger brush. I don't know why I'm using such a small one. I know better. There it is. So we're going to do our winter blue. I will use tape sometimes, and I'm going to show you how we do creatively use little notepad notes. These things I find absolutely amazing for sharp corners, and we are actually going to use these in a couple of spots. So keep those handy if you happen to have any. Your little post-it notes. Great for tiny corners, unlike tape. Alright, so that's my blue. Now for the red, I'm not a fan of red, so I do tend to use a lot of pinks and turn them into my ideas of red. So we're going to use coral blush. And we're going to paint the house, coral blush. This one, same thing. Okay, now we're going to go to my wasabi green, paint the trees. We're just blocking in the large parts of color. Everything else sort of comes later as we go. Trees. Now here is where I like my little trick. Because I have a point, so I'm going to use my little sticky notes and show you how I do this. Because I've got a nice point at the top of my tree and I kind of want to keep that, I'll take my sticky notes, stick them up there. Actually down here, I'm going to try to cover where I don't want to get paint. I don't want to get paint over there where the gap is between the two trees. So I'm just going to tape off my nice point. And what's going to happen is I'm actually going to get a nice little point in there. With my green. It's just a quick. I love these things. See? Look at that. And it's reusable, which is even better. So I can get this other point done in here. Just covers where needed. Put it in firmly into place. Just paint quickly. I find it's not going to seep under because of the sticky stuff that's underneath, but I do just quickly. And then move it. So now I've got my tree, my nice sharp little tree points. Now we're going to take, what am I going to use? We're going to take mustard, moon yellow. We're going to paint our stars. And my star actually is painted. I just used the chisel edge of the brush just to get my corners. It's a very light coat. Just using the chisel in the points just to move that little bit of paint around. Instead of trying to get a perfectly good coat right off the bat, I just get a light coat in there just to get my tips done. Star and the moon. And you're noticing now too is the background shading is starting to fade away, like it did in the back here. The remaining quilt panels are going to stay buttermilk. So they're going to stay that color. So now we're going to go back. I'm going to turn the video off, let you guys go ahead and put your second coat on everything. So we'll come back. It's going to look like this, just completely painted. Okay, so I've got my second coat on everything. Now we're just going to go and add a couple other colors just to finish it off. And I'm going to do with my light buttermilk. Just get a few little pieces added in here that I want marked off for later. I'm going to take my little sticky notes and we're going to go down and we are going to do the tree bottoms. These are candy canes. We'll do one at a time with light buttermilk. Oh, and I also want to note that I did forget before to paint my little bird. So the bird is coral blush, just the same as the house. So if you want to throw a coat on there, now would be a good time. So I'll put my coat of light buttermilk. Can't have everything the same color. One, and I'll move my little stickies. So candy cane trees. Nothing is as it should be when we do my designs. Terry taught me well. Have a little fun with things. Add little bits and things of don't necessarily belong, but they're just kind of fun. They never asked me to do flowers though. Flowers an F word for me. Most of my students have called my F words or floating and freehand, but to me the word flower is an F word. I don't do flowers. I don't understand flowers. Unless of course they're whimsical folk art flowers, I can do those. And then I'm going to actually do these little buttermilk ones. I decided that I didn't like them to be buttermilk. And I also decided I wanted one more blue square. So it's up to you. I just added another blue square instead of a white square in my quilt. Because I think the little snowman faces at the end are way too cute. And let's see, what else did we miss? Candy cane bottoms. I'm not going to do anything up here because that's just going to be snow text when we do the roofs. They're really, they're just a big messy blob of nothingness right in there now. Now also, so now's a good time to go and look. I forgot we have the roof. Get a coat of coral blush on there. Get our birdie. Finish my bird. Just put a finish coat on him. He's going to have a little stroke work and stuff later, but for now, just a big fat red body. Fat red birds. He's well fed. Okay. Body. And then, where's that little face? I'm going to make a most awesome snowman nose. And again, snowman noses and post-it notes. Perfect! Okay, so nose in here. See what a great nose it makes. And you get a nice little point on your nose. And it is going to be Canyon Orange. Get that on there. Painted little nose. And I only keep this on just long enough to get my base coat with a thin coat of paint. I don't want to keep it in there. If you keep your sticky notes on there and you base coat 2 or 3 layers of paint, you are going to get a definite ridge. So I just wanted to help me keep my little place in line. Just get a nice defined shape. And then we just throw them away. Okay, so now we've got all our base coating in place. So we've got basically a project that we're going to follow now. So what we're going to do is we're going to work on the snowman body because he's still basically, the first background was the background with the stencils. The snowman body now becomes my next background. So what we're going to do is I'm going to get out my dry brush. I like these, my dome rounds, blenders and stuff from Dynasty brush. I just love these things. I have tons of them, like piles and piles. I have several of them on the go at any given time. I find I like them. If it's a dome round, they're rounded on the front, and I find that for me, it helps me do my dry brushing. So I use them on my side. If you don't want anything that's totally flat, Deerfoot's not really going to work. So any brush that you have that's dome round or chiseled sort of things. I have these awesome ones from Artist Club, and this shape. So if you have something that's a chisel blender, blending brush. These work really good as well. And it's all about the hairs. The hairs are quite coarse. And this one would be the same if you have these. You just use them on your side as well. Great for dry brushing, especially in larger spaces. So those are another option. But I love these. So I'm going to use these. And what we're going to do is we're going to have a towel handy, an old towel, and we're going to use our light buttermilk, and we're going to dry brush. And when I dry brush, it's very similar to when I was stenciling. I'm going to dip my brush into my paint, my light butter. I'm going to swirl my paint into the brush. I did something similar for dry brushing or for my stenciling, except that I actually want the brush to start getting a load of. So anyway, so I'm going to just load my brush up. I want to get a fair bit of paint in there, but not so it's soaking wet. I don't want to be able to paint with it. I want to dry brush with it. And then I'm going to take my towel, and I'm just going to scrub it on my towel. This is a very well used towel. It's going to take the bulk of the paint off. If there's any drops of paint or anything in my brush, it will take it off. And then I'm going to start, and I'm just going to swirl. You won't see a lot of color. You just want to see little bits, hints of color. And I will zoom in here, show you how this goes on. Just keep it on camera when I do. I do load my brush regularly. I don't want it to get saturated with paint. And I'm just working in a circular motion, staying away from the outer edges, just sort of staying in where the shading is not, just to add a little bit of highlight. And it starts to create just a little hint of different color. Gives the snowman a little more interest. Just swirls around, but the brush is always used on its side. And we'll zoom back out. The body. And we're going to do the body the same way. Pick a smaller spot and start lightly and then dry brush more as you want. We're not trying to change the color. We're just trying to add little hints of light buttermilk in there. Just create a little bit of an interest. And of course, if you have any water lines from your shading, it does pick them up. Get a little bit more paint. My towel. And start in little corners. And I work in little sections. I don't try to go like this. I just work in small sections. So don't go like this, try to do big areas. Just work in small, little circular motions. Turn the brush around as needed. And if you get a little bit heavier and white here and there, don't worry about it. It's all going to come together in the end. Does build up the arm muscles. That's been floating around. What is that? And you can see, like, you should be able to see a little bit of paint, just not a lot. And even if you think you made a mistake and you got too much paint on there, don't worry about it. It's all going to be, what we're doing is we're just making him a little on the frosty side. do all my snowmen this way, so if you see them, that's how they end up this way. Just change the shading colors, that's all I ever do. We've done here, so go in here. Nothing here. I usually try not to go over the shading itself, go around it, because the snowman color, original, the buttermilk, actually works in creating depth in the snowman as well. So by adding little layers of color, we're just giving him sort of dimension, a little frosty dimension. See, first coat, that quick. But we never stop there. I'm going to turn my piece upside down because we're actually going to do the base as well. And then the base we're just putting its dry brush coat on for under his snow bottom. We will be shading and floating and doing all sorts of other wonderful things down here to give him to make it snow. So there. So that is done. And it's the same old dirty brush. And the thing is, you don't get this brush wet. It stays stays dry. And just wipe it off on your paper towel. Take out the bulk of the paint. And then we're going to pick up warm white. And we're going to do the second bit. And this is the sort of the fun part, actually. Because this is where you actually start seeing how he turns a little snowy and frosty. But I'm going to use the same brush. There's no point in changing color or washing my brush out. With these brushes, if I do need to change between colors, I will use a little hand sanitizer. But I have about 3 or 4 on the go at any given time so that I don't have to worry about my changing of colors. And we'll go back up to his little face. A little bit more white. Warm white. So you're starting to see sort of 3 colors showing up in there now. Cleaning my brush. Start light, press a little heavier as you feel you need. Swirly motion. Build up arm muscles. Ow. Have no upper body strength for muscle problems, but this does help. Hurts, helps, burns. But it is my art and my passion, so who cares, right? No pain, no gain. So while I'm painting this, I am getting ready for Hoot. I started it. I've actually been to Hoot. I started it before I went to Hoot, this video, and I've finished it now that I'm home from Hoot. A lot of fun meeting everybody. I met some of you that are taking this class with me. It's so much fun to put faces to everybody when you do get a chance to meet them. And then next coming up is my trip to Seattle. Now that I'm home. To go to, actually Portland. The Portland Convention is coming up next. Loved going to my trade shows. My husband thinks I'm a trade show junkie, but you know what? They're fun. One day you won't be able to go, right? Okay, so that's the warm white. Just finish the snow up on the bottom. Turn them around again. Try to keep them on camera. Move that along. Okay, so that's basically the gist of it. It will have another warm white dry brush towards the end, like when I'm finished everything. We will go through and just do a little bit more for interest. You know, here and there if I want it to look a little frosty or if it's too dark, too light. We'll see. Then you can wash your brush out now and put it aside. And put him back where he needs to be. So now comes the really scary part. We're actually going to deepen some shading with Wedgwood Blue.